What do you think about that? Am I getting ready to go to the loony bin because I'm talking to the plants, or how can I make sense of that?
Yeah, no, great. So before we started the call, I was telling you I have a story related to that came to me also mowing the lawn. I was cutting the lawn for an elderly couple I take care of in West Palm, and while I was doing it, it's an acre, it's a lot, and it's like a lot of trees. There's a lot of wild plants there. It's kind of like a little jungle. I've been cultivating with them, and as I was mowing the lawn, I started to smell the different plants I was cutting, of which I'm familiar with. One of them is bitter melon, cerasee. Another one is animu, guinea henweed. And as I'm like smelling them, I started to laugh, thinking about like how most people don't enjoy cutting the lawn. And I had this like whole comic in my mind like play out that I still want to animate, of like a disgruntled, unhappy dad on like a Sunday morning mowing the lawn, but getting this like aromatic inhalation of incredibly strong botanical herbs unknowingly, and like the unconscious any like dysfunction in his organism totally taking place without him being conscious of it, all because he cuts the grass twice a week or once a month or whatever, I started a campaign about becoming a conscious lawn cutter. Also, the other side of that, I think I've only made one meme in my life, like personally. I was really inspired to make this. Found myself understanding the toggling, if you will, between living in the world and then having this like profound experience that everything around you has a name and a story.
What does it mean to have a name for the things around us, to be in relationship with plants, or to connect with plants that are around us? Like, what are we talking about here?
I feel like it comes down to being curious, and it's much like being in relationship with people, your friends and your family. Like, you get to know them, you get to learn of their histories, you get to learn where they came from, their origins, and what they do, how they are. Or then you start to notice, especially if you live with them, you really start to notice like the daily occurrences, right?
How did you get started in this, and what was the journey that kind of took you to where you are? How do you even initiate this process of getting into a relationship?
It started when I was around 19 years old. It was like 2007. It started with illness, which is somewhat comes to things like this, I think, at least from what I've seen. I received a tetanus shot for stepping on a nail, went through my foot as I was at work. And from that, fell very ill with Guillain-Barré, which is a demyelinating nerve disease that ascends from the feet and usually reaches the head and renders the person paralyzed. So I was in Bethesda Hospital in Boynton for 48 days, and I probably should have been there for months, but my insurance stopped covering me, which was a wild Western medical story in and of itself. And I went home at 19 with a $1 million hospital bill, and learned how to walk again at home. So that was like a giant seed with a lot of bitterness, pain, and agony, and all kinds of other things. But in that experience, I was at that time desperate to understand something different about how to work with people in that way. And so that led me to first to cannabis, believe it or not, to work with the pain management, right? And I had worked with that plant prior to that experience on a very minimal scale. Like through that process, it wasn't like an overnight long of meeting things, along the way, meeting the people too that hold those things.
Why does this matter? What's important for us to understand as it relates to connecting with plants and having that relationship in our lives, as opposed to what is it, that attitude, from this picture?
One thing, I've met a lot of people that into a plant person because it's the understanding are so inseparable from our dependency on them, whether I'm talking about food, medicine, or even just like the shade that exists to help our AC bill be lower. The thing is too is that it's not for everyone. I don't think sharing is like this message that a person needs to become an herbalist or start growing plants, although I think the world would be a better place if people did start doing that en masse, for sure. I think that there's many modalities to bring us into like what you were referencing, that nervous system reset, that calm, that baseline, that groundedness. Some people find it in different ways, which is amazing. For me personally, I feel like being in the garden, like literally, physically being in someone's garden, my garden, does something to us. And so in a way of how the world's been going for some time, that may seem like something so simple that it's complex, so out there that it just doesn't make sense. But then you actually go and do it, you begin to notice something.
How do we acknowledge the realities or some of the places where this approach could become maybe extreme or go off the rails, but also where we kind of get in our own way of actually establishing some of these relationships that could be nourishing to us?
Hippie comes from hypocrite, from what I understand, in some way, because they were like saying one thing and doing another. So I never aligned with that title, and never called myself that, never was like, ha ha ha, like I love this peace and flowers kind of vibe. I like guns. So many preconceived notions about what someone that studies or works with or loves plants, that means that they do this, this, and this, and this. Like, you know, it becomes this boxing in thing that humans end up doing regardless. Joyfully and, you know, without desire, shadow goes sometimes for people, which is good. You know, it kind of helps people understand it's like, it's not just like that. To always have one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. And so like to walk that balance of integration constantly.
What is important about connecting with our surroundings?
There's a few pieces that come for me. One is a sense of purpose, you know, which it largely can be said to be missing when we look out into the world at large. For me, it's almost like a geolocation of ourselves. The aspect too that it's important on a real way, you know, listens at.
What are we extracting and making use of from our environment because it like helps us? And then what are we nourishing or cultivating this relationship, and how do we initiate that process?
The basic essence from what I can distill of that is that in the animistic worldview, right, that everything has a spirit, everything is alive, the plants being largely, of course, included in that. And you come to encounter all the world global cultures pre the spread of quote-unquote Judeo-Christian movements do this and totally participated. What's
nourished you personally and inspired you to make that part of work and the life you're living?
Everything, you know, like witnessing the generational pass down of wisdom, witnessing the cultivation of the healing path being integrated into their lives. Like to them, is something that they do when they need help or when they need to cleanse and come back to center.
Share a little bit around like what have you seen as being valuable for yourself, or in maybe some of the examples of reflections around you, people around you, of what's helpful to get shaved down in order for us to be able to have this essential relationship. What has to go?
Showed them the way not to do it. In my experience over the years, it's been letting go of the heaviness around judgment and shame. These like heavy, dense emotions that literally hold us down. Even another, for me personally, in the world of like working with the earth and with all these good things, it's so easy to sign up for everything. For me, some of that letting go is just kind of like focusing in on just a few things, of just a like very small amount of things to get down to the goodness of what those things are.